Here's a question. What if the billion-dollar idea that changes your life is already in a drawer in your closet? For Sara Blakely, it was. She wasn't an inventor. She wasn't in fashion. She was selling fax machines door to door for an office supply company, feeling totally stuck, like a lot of us can relate to in our 20s. And yet, one ordinary Friday night in 1998, staring down at a pair of white pants, she made a tiny decision that changed everything. A pair of scissors, a cut below the ankle of pantyhose, and suddenly she had the idea for the very first pair of footless shapewear. That's how SPANX was born. From an everyday problem countless women have all had, solved in a really simple but most unexpected way. And in just a few more short years, Sara Blakely became the youngest self-made woman billionaire, gracing the cover of Forbes and breaking all sorts of rules in fashion, in marketing, and business along the way. This is her story. I'm sharing exactly how she built her successful brand, and from that golden wisdom, I'll also share the exact steps that could lead you to bringing your next billion-dollar idea to life. Hey DJ, play my intro song.
Hey there, I'm Melody Bose, your host of Jeans with a Blazer, a podcast about rewriting the rules of work and life.
Guys, get ready to get really inspired because Sara's journey as an entrepreneur is fascinating in just so many ways. It's messy, it's got twists and turns, it's so real, it's everything Jeans with a Blazer coded, and it reinforces two really powerful, super important ideas. One, your next billion-dollar idea could come from solving a very simple problem, and two, paying attention to your why above everything else is what really matters. And on top of that, the things that she struggled with before she founded her company are so real, and it's something that I feel a lot of us can identify with or have been in at least one point of our life. So I'm going to give you a quick timeline and some fast facts just to put some things in perspective for when you are so aligned in the why, not the direction, the why of your life, how quickly things can start to take shape. Okay, here we go. 1998. Sara cut the bottom feet part of her pantyhose and her idea for SPANX was born, and she poured her savings into her company, which was a whopping $5,000. 1999, Blakely gets her product distributed into Neiman Marcus. SPANX's first year revenue tops $4 million. That is 1 year later. 2000, Oprah names SPANX her favorite product of the year and sales take off. Sales hit $10 million in revenue. 2001, SPANX is featured in QVC and sells over 8,000 units in under 6 minutes. 2012, Sara graces the cover of Forbes magazine and is named the youngest woman self-billionaire. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So we can see just how quickly when the idea for SPANX clicked into place, it grew and grew and grew and grew. But of course, it's not without its trials and tribulations along the way. And I'm going to drill into those even more because those in-between moments in that timeline, because honestly, that is where the good stuff is. But first, let's look up to the story leading up to that life-changing moment in 1998, because those are just as important, right? We want to know, how we got there and where we're going, and it starts with the origin story. Okay, so what fascinates me about Sara's whole timeline is she talks about the thing that I think a lot of extremely successful people who are self-made kind of glaze over. You always hear about them saying, yeah, I was struggling financially, I was drowning in debt, and then one day I was eating cereal, and then I looked at the cereal flake and it was in the shape of this thing that I needed to invent, and then poof, I invented it and my life took off, blah, blah, blah. They rarely talk about the amount of time it took to get to that moment. And on top of that, the little moments of fire that kind of alluded to that big day that invention was coming. So they make it seem like on a dime, their life changed and suddenly they were motivated to invent this thing or start this business, but it's not really like that. There is so much of a foundation that needs to be in place, and I'll explain what that means for Sara. She shares in previous interviews that growing up, she grew up in Clearwater, Florida, by the way, so shout out to my fellow Florida girl. But she explains that from a young age, she recognized the importance of investing in herself. And guys, that doesn't mean having to spend like thousands of dollars on coaches or courses or whatever. She literally talks about being in high school and she had these cassette tapes on growing your mindset that like her dad gave her or something. And they were by Dr. Wayne Dyer, who was a motivational speaker. And she jokes about how like people never wanted to ride in her car to go to parties because while everyone was like jamming out to popular music and like Salt and Pepper and whatever, she had these mindset tapes of like inhale and think of success and blah, blah, blah. So from a very young age, she was kind of setting herself up for greatness. And okay, just because you weren't like developing your mindset when you were a teenager, does that mean that you won't accomplish great things and become a billionaire? No, absolutely not. But you can start at any time. And why wouldn't you? Because honestly, if you think about it, the time is going to pass anyway, right? And that made me think. It made me think about the amount of media that we consume on a regular basis and how much of that is mind numbing. Now, I get it. Sometimes you have a long day and your brain just needs a break and you want something to distract yourself. So what happens? You doom scroll on social media or you pop on some Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, and before you know it, boom, 3 hours of your life have just gone by. What if the conscious decision was made to seek out content that strengthens your brain instead of distracts us from the stress that we feel? Good news. You're already doing that kind of by listening to this podcast, so you're already winning. But instead of naturally gravitating towards drama or entertainment, because that is the easy thing to do, what if that craving was directed to bettering yourself even more? I'm not trying to shame you on liking what you like and your entertainment and enjoying things. No, I have a whole podcast episode that dissects the power dynamics of the secret lives of Mormon wives, and I love me some Call Her Daddy. I'm not trying to virtue signal or anything like that. Like what you like, enjoy what you like, but life is all about balance, right? And there's so much information out there for free. If you could read or watch or listen to more things that add to your knowledge base and would eventually lead to your billion-dollar idea, why wouldn't you? So anyway, Sara knew the importance of investing in herself, and she kept that with her throughout her entire life. So she went to college. She graduated from Florida State, which I too went to Florida State. Go Seminoles. And we were actually both members of the Tri Delta Sorority Sisterhood. So we have technically hung out in the same house, just years apart. She graduated with a degree in communications in 1993, and she enters this chapter of her life where she has mentioned that she felt totally, completely, and utterly lost. She explains that the majority of her 20s was kind of all over the place. Does that sound familiar to anyone? No? Okay. So anyway, after graduating college, she works for 3 months at Disney, but she was never selected to audition as a character role. Then she thought she wanted to be an attorney, and she failed the LSAT not once, but twice. And then for 7 years, she worked for an office supplies company where she sold fax machines door to door. Not exactly glamorous. And here's the thing, she was doing pretty good in this role. She was even promoted to national sales trainer, but she just wasn't fulfilled by this job. Which brings me to the next big fiery moment. At one point, Sara Blakely was driving home after work and she pulls over and makes this huge life-altering decision. She says, "This is not my life. This is not how I want it to go. This isn't what I want." Had she not done that, she could have probably climbed the ladder and kept getting promoted, but she was like, this is not my path. And then another really important thing happened. She realized that if she didn't want to keep doing this, she had to get really clear on what she did like about her current situation because that was going to be her vehicle for change. So she asked herself, well, okay, what am I good at? And the only thing that she could think of was sales. And she liked sales. Okay, cool. But this is the most important part that I think is the golden nugget of this story. She didn't stop there. Oh no. If she did, she could have just ended up in another sales job where it was just the same story, new day, new product. She took it a step further and she asked herself why she liked sales. And her answer was this: she loved giving people something that could change or improve their life. Okay. So later on that day, she takes out her journal, and that's another key thing I think is really important to note. Sara Blakely journaled, and it's honestly such a good way to jot down our thoughts and our gratitude and set in motion the narrative that we want. So journal. Okay, but in her journal, she wrote, I want to invent something that I can sell to millions of people that will make them feel good about themselves. So she didn't have any idea of what that thing was, but she knew the why. And because she didn't know the what yet, she asked the universe, the higher powers, God, whatever belief that you subscribe to, she asked, give me that idea. And 2 years later, the year was 1998. She was getting ready for a party. She had an outfit with these fresh pair of white pants that Madonna, Mariah, and Shania would take one look and be like, do you want to join us on tour, baby? Because you look fly. But the thing is she put them on and suddenly the fit was not serving because it showed these undergarment lines. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about if you've been there. And then in a moment of what could very well be divine intervention, the idea strikes her like a bolt of lightning and she sees that pair of pantyhose and a pair of scissors, and the rest is history. Don't worry. We are going to get into the rest, but I just think it's really cool that she says her idea didn't come to her for 2 years after that moment that she decided things were going to be different. And I feel like we have such high expectations from the instant gratification that we see every day from social media and notifications that if we decide something like to change our life, for example, we want to see those results right away. And then if we don't, then it's easy to get discouraged and then give up. But between the moment Sara decided that she was going to change the course of her entire life and the day her idea for Spanx was born, if she had given up at any point in her vision along that timeline, we might not have Spanx. And Sara may not have been a billionaire. And most tragically of all, we would not have this podcast episode to be talking about it. So the lesson here is that sometimes things take time to manifest and for our thoughts to percolate. And you could just throw in the towel and accept your life the way it is and say, well, it wasn't meant for me. But yes, it was. You are meant for something huge if you want it, of course. And the difference between one day and day one could be patience and trusting the process and taking those intentional actions along the way. I'm not going to get into quantum physics. That is a conversation for an entire other day. But basically, if you can imagine it, it's already yours. And there is a reality for you that already exists where you are achieving that. And this has been proven in peer-reviewed journals. This isn't just nonsense. Anyway, I digress. In the meantime, the idea for Spanx is born. Sara was still selling fax machines and she was putting money into her savings because she thought if she was going to invent something, that's probably going to cost something. Right? But it's not like she had $100,000 to invest in her company or others backing her or investors. No, Sara invested just $5,000 of her own money, and that's not a lot of money. And I don't say that to sound tone deaf, right? $5,000 could be several months' rent or mortgage, but in comparison to what it can take to start a company from scratch, that's really not a whole lot, especially when you think about the return on investment, because those $5,000 turned into millions and eventually billions. So now we're all caught up to that moment in 1998. What happens next? She wears the footless pantyhose underneath her white pants, and even though they keep rolling up the entire night at the party, she knows without a shadow of a doubt she's onto something. Here's where the magic happens. By day, she kept selling fax machines, but by night, she became a self-taught entrepreneur. She spent nights researching hosiery and fabrics and learned that most pantyhose were manufactured in North Carolina. At this point, she lived in Atlanta. She also scoured existing patents to ensure that her idea was unique. That's key, studying the competition, making sure your product doesn't already exist. Sara knew that her lack of fashion background might be a weakness, but she turned that into an advantage by approaching the problem with fresh eyes and a consumer's perspective. This is an issue that a lot of companies struggle with. So while doing this, she fine-tuned her concept while keeping it a secret from everyone who wasn't directly helping her move it forward. I love this. So I love this because sometimes outside noise can be really discouraging and distracting. And Sara was quietly working on this and just keeping her blinders on. And sometimes we want that validation of, oh, I'm working on this thing, I'm creating this thing, and we tell everyone about it. But Sara was really strategic about it by moving in complete silence, just building and building and building. Now, I've talked about in previous episodes how there's something really powerful with sharing your story with people and telling your story along the way, like in the Sailing with Phoenix episode or in the Shay McGee episode. But the key difference here is Sara was inventing something, and she knew that she was onto something really big, and there is a chance that some big corporation could have stolen her idea. And it was only a matter of time before capitalism caught on. So, if you're a creative and you have this idea of sharing something like your journey of urban gardening from your 500 square foot apartment, cool. But if you are inventing something completely new, just be super mindful of how you hold those cards to your chest. All right. Now, Sara has a prototype in mind. She has yet another obstacle to face. At this time, the clothing manufacturer companies were a male dominated industry. Okay, so she understood that they might not see her vision like she did. So what did she do? She cold called countless of mills in North Carolina, describing her idea for footless body shaping pantyhose, and she was met with skepticism or just flat out hangups at every turn. So she didn't have financial backing. She didn't have investors, no team, no nothing. So everyone she met with to produce this idea was like, "Are you okay? Like, there's no way this would sell." Sara was like, "All right, guys, you want to play hardball? Let's play hardball." So she took off time at her job and she drove to North Carolina to knock on factory doors in person. That is bootstrapping if I've ever heard it. So the reception was still chilly. Most plant managers didn't see the vision and questioned her credentials, and she said it was a very lonely time of rejection. So Sara Blakely returned home empty-handed. But 2 weeks later, a breakthrough call came. One mill owner had mentioned Blakely's ideas to his daughters, and they convinced him that it had merit. So he decided to take a chance on Spanx. Another amazing thing, Sara could have given up after the rejection, knowing, okay, no one sees my vision, but she relentlessly would not quit. And when you keep showing up and showing up and showing up and trying, that consistency can cross paths with a little bit of luck and magic can happen. And that's exactly what did. So, with finally securing a manufacturer, Blakely had a partner willing to produce a trial batch of her unconventional hosiery. This partnership was crucial for moving the idea from concept to prototype. But wait, there's more challenges. Working with the mill on the first samples, Blakely learned just how much the industry needed a woman's perspective. She discovered, for example, that manufacturers had been using the same size waistband for all sizes of pantyhose to cut costs. This meant that a petite woman and a plus-size woman all had the same kind of situation with the waistband. Like, who allowed this? So she was like, nope, this has to change. Another issue she noticed in the industry: the product testing was only done on plastic mannequins. And since most human bodies are not made of plastic, she got real feedback by giving her mom, grandma, and friends her prototype to try to get real feedback. Genius. And another smart move she had was patenting her idea, which she basically DIY'd it instead of hiring an attorney that would have charged her like $3,000 to $5,000. And with men also dominating law, she felt awkward explaining her patent to a man, so she wrote her own patent application and hired an attorney for much cheaper just to polish the application. Another thing she DIY'd, the packaging. She knew in this industry she had to stand out. So what did she do? She chose bright colors. Now this was huge because at the time, in the 90s, aisles for hosiery were very drab, like think neutrals and beiges and gray. Her packaging was bright red with a little cartoon of a blonde girl modeled after herself. Guys, if you are going to disrupt anything, an industry or a product or whatever, you have to rewrite the rules sometimes. There is something so valuable in studying the competition. Yes, absolutely you should. But if you're going to do something that makes waves, you have to take bold steps. So that's exactly what Sara Blakely did. Another individualistic thing that she did that was very bold is she wrote on the packaging things that she would say to her girlfriends. So instead of giving like all the specs and makes your waist look slimmer, blah, 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 she wrote things on there as if she were talking to her girlfriends, which made the whole product sound fresh and human. So the box of Spanx simply and cheekily said, "It makes your butt look better." All right, so she's got her product, she's got her packaging, she's got her patent. Now she has to do the next super hard part. She has to sell it. She said, chat, we are going to go big or we're going to go home. So she called and she called and she called and she called until she convinced Neiman Marcus, the buyer of Neiman Marcus, to give her just 10 minutes of her time. Blakely flew herself to the Neiman Marcus headquarters, and during the meeting, she sensed that the buyer was a little skeptical of her idea. So thinking fast, she invited the buyer to the ladies' room, the buyer was also a woman, where she changed into Spanx under her pants to visibly demonstrate the transformation that they gave. The difference was obvious. There were no undergarment lines, and it gave a trimmer, more uniform look. And she made the sale on the spot. Ooh, impressed. The buyer placed an order to test Spanx in 7 Neiman Marcus stores, and soon after, other prestigious stores like Saks Fifth Avenue, Bloomingdale's, and Bergdorf Goodman heard the buzz and followed Neiman Marcus's lead, stocking Spanx products on their shelves as well. So Sara did another thing. It keeps escalating from here. In stores, she negotiated for prime placement, which meant she convinced Neiman Marcus to display Spanx in the shoe department rather than the hosiery aisle so that more women would see it while trying on an outfit. Boom. Thinking like a lady with a struggle here. We can all agree, the girl had hustle. Moving along the timeline, now we're at the year 2000. Spanx is doing pretty well in all these department stores. And even though the company is doing well, it's making, $4 million, give or take, a year in sales at this point. And that sounds huge. It is. But when you think about how that breaks down into actual profit and money in Sara's pocket, I'm just going to do a little bit of girl math here, but you have to think about taxes, which is like half, manufacturing costs, which is a lot, the packaging, the cut that department stores get, paying the employees, her accountant, that all factors in. So Sara was doing better than when she was selling fax machines, but that's not quite the FU money flying in private jets every weekend yet. Now, another major win happens. Sara famously sent a basket of Spanx to Oprah Winfrey in hopes of exposure, and it worked. Oprah held up the product on her show for her Favorite Things segment, effectively introducing Spanx to millions of American women at once, which is something you have to pay a lot of money for to get in the door of Oprah, but Sara just guerrilla marketed and she did it. The impact was immediate and massive. She recalls that the publicity catapulted Spanx's sales from about $4 million in a year to $10 million. And Sara was like, oh, let's go. Next steps. Expansion. The mid to late 2000s saw Spanx cement its status as a cultural phenomenon and category leader. Blakely continued to reinvest in product development, adding things like mid-thigh shapers, camisoles, bras, maternity pantyhose, and even men's undershirts under the Spanx umbrella. This product diversification helped turn Spanx into a go-to brand for all things shapewear and not just one novelty item. And it wasn't long before Hollywood celebrities openly touted their Spanx, and by the 2010s, it was an open secret that stars wore Spanx under red carpet gowns. In fact, at the 2013 Oscars, celebrities like Jessica Alba, Adele, and Jennifer Garner were noted to be wearing Spanx under their gowns. Now, here we are at the big moment. More than a decade after she started Spanx, she reaches that milestone that solidified her spot in entrepreneur history. In 2012, Forbes magazine declared Sara Blakely the world's youngest self-made woman billionaire at age 41, thanks to her ownership of Spanx. And at the time, this is really cool. At the time, Spanx was still 100% owned by Blakely and had no outside investors or debt, and it was reportedly generating about $250 million in annual revenue with very healthy profit margins. Well done. It wasn't until 2021 where Sara sold a majority stake of Spanx to Blackstone in a deal valuing the company at $1.2 billion. This move was so cool because for several reasons. Okay, so in very classic Spanx fashion, the deal was notable for empowering women. It was negotiated by an all-female Blackstone team, and after the sale, Spanx's board of directors became entirely female, with Blakely remaining as the executive chairwoman. Obviously. She also celebrated by giving each of her employees $10,000 and 2 first-class plane tickets to anywhere in the world that they wanted to go, underscoring her people-centric values. 8 left no crumbs with that move. Brilliant. So each of these milestones, from the Oprah moment to the billion-dollar valuation, marked a turning point in Spanx's growth. They illustrate how the brand capitalized on opportunities, scaled smartly, and maintained momentum over 2 decades. Spanx's trajectory was not a straight line of success, but a series of strategic leaps, as we saw, each building on the last. A testament to her vision and the brand's ability to deliver on its promises, solve that problem girlfriend. Okay. Oh, by the way, while she was building this insane company, she got married to her husband, Jesse Itzler, a very successful entrepreneur who I actually saw speak at a conference in San Diego in like 2017. And I remember specifically he was gushing about courting her and their relationship. Like it was the cutest thing ever. She became a mom. She started a philanthropy called the Sara Blakely Foundation to support women entrepreneurs. And she became a minority owner in the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta girly, you go. One might think, all right, Sara, girl, you have done the most. You'll sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labors. Oh no, she's still the executive chairwoman of SPANX. But then she's like, felt cute, might start another successful business. So she launched yet another venture in 2024, Sneaks, which is high-heeled sneakers designed for comfort. And it sold out of multiple styles within the first 24 hours. Because, of course. So to recap, let's look at the step-by-step how to become a billionaire, according to Sara Blakely. Step 1, decide your life is going to change. Step 2, vocalize or write out your why and be super clear on it. You don't have to figure out the what or the when just yet. Step 3, take intentional actions as you trust the process. It could take 6 months. It could take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5. And that could look like saving up if you want to invent something. Take a class or certification in something that would support your why or put you on course or in the environment to inspire that billion-dollar idea. Step 4, once you have your idea, research the competition, research what exists around it to familiarize yourself with that space. Step 5, once you've researched it, identify the problems with that competition or industry and how your idea, product, service, whatever could solve it. Step 6, create your MVP, your minimum viable product, a prototype, a design, something that demonstrates the proof of your concept and the problem it can solve. Step 7, use your weakness, such as lack of experience in an industry, to fuel a new strength that gives your product a key differentiator, like bright packaging in a world of neutrals. Step 8, take risks and think outside the box to get your thing in front of the people to sell it. Call, email, slide into those DMs to get a meeting with the boss's assistant. Do whatever it takes to get in the room with whoever you need to convince them that your thing will solve their problem, create revenue, whatever. Step 9, find new ways to get in front of audiences that would care about your product, like sending it to influencers or Oprah. Step 10, dust your hands, but don't actually keep scaling. And there you have it. If that sounds like a lot of work, yeah, unless you were born an heiress or surrounded by unlimited resources, it's going to be a hard journey. Otherwise, everyone would be a billionaire, but that's what it takes. So go do that if that's what you want. So Sara Blakely did not build SPANX overnight. It took years of rejection, late nights, and relentless belief in an idea no one else could see. But she turned that one DIY hack into a movement that redefined an entire industry. The takeaway? Don't dismiss your crazy ideas. Sometimes the thing you do to solve your own problem becomes the billion-dollar solution the world didn't even know it needed. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.
That's a wrap on this episode of Jeans with a Blazer. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, a mindset shift, or just the push you needed, do me a favor. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Leave a review wherever you enjoy your podcasts. It helps more people find it, and it keeps these conversations going. And I love hearing from you. Follow at Jeans with a Blazer and tag me with your biggest takeaways, your latest wins, or just tell me what topics you want to hear about next. See you next time.